You know, when we talk about India ending trade with America, most people immediately think about numbers, GDP percentages, export charts, and balance sheets. But I want you to understand something much deeper. This is not just economics, it's psychology. It's the human mind being expressed at the scale of a nation. Because just like a person, a nation can be trapped in dependency. Just like a person, a nation can live for years under the illusion that it needs someone else to survive. And just like a person, there comes a moment when you look in the mirror and say, enough, I don't need this anymore, I am strong enough on my own. For decades, America was like the dominant partner in this relationship. It dictated terms, set the tone, and acted like India could not succeed without its approval, and maybe at one time that was true. Just like when you're young, you depend on your parents, your teachers, your mentors. But there comes a moment where dependency is no longer growth, it's a prison, and India reached that moment. It looked at the situation and said, why should we continue to let one nation hold the keys to our progress? Why should we live under the constant pressure of tariffs, of conditions, of lectures about what we should or should not do? This is the psychology of liberation. It's not about hatred, it's not about revenge, it's not even about walking away from opportunity. It's about self-respect, because if you build your future on someone else's permission, you will never really be free. That's true for a person, and it's true for a country. Now think about this. America believed it had leverage because India relied on its markets, but leverage only works if the other side has no alternative, if they're too afraid to let go. And here's where the psychology changes. India has alternatives. Russia, China, Southeast Asia, even Africa. Suddenly, the chains don't feel as heavy because you realize they were never locked to begin with. You were holding them in place yourself. You see, dependency is not just economic, it's emotional. It's psychological. When someone convinces you that you need them to succeed, they've already won. And this is where I see India's decision as more than a trade policy. It's a declaration of independence. It's a mindset shift. It's India standing up and saying, we are not afraid to walk away. We are not afraid to redefine our path. We are not afraid to stand alone if necessary. This is powerful because once you remove fear, you remove control. And once you remove control, the balance of power changes forever. America's threats of tariffs, of economic punishment, suddenly lose their edge. Because what can you really threaten a nation with if they've already chosen to let go of your grip? That's like trying to control a bodybuilder by threatening to take away his weights. He'll just find another gym, another tool, another way to grow. Now let's go deeper. There's a philosophical truth here. Life rewards those who dare to walk away from comfort zones. It rewards those who risk breaking dependency for the sake of freedom, and freedom is not cheap, it requires sacrifice. India will face short-term pain. It will lose some easy advantages, but in exchange it gains something much greater, sovereignty of choice, the power to say yes or no, not because someone else allows it, but because it decides for itself. And I want you to imagine how this changes the psychology of a nation. When a people begin to believe that they are not small players, but central architects of their destiny, the energy shifts, the ambition grows. The confidence expands. This is how empires rise, not through begging for access, but by creating new centers of gravity. That's what America never understood. Dependency always backfires. When you try to make others rely on you, they eventually wake up, they resent it, and they break free. And when they break free, they become stronger than ever before. So don't think of this as India walking away from trade. Think of this as India breaking through a psychological ceiling, tearing apart the illusion of limitation, and choosing self-respect over comfort. That is always the harder choice, but it is always the more powerful one. And here's what you must take from this, whether you are an individual or a nation. Never build your future on dependency. Never let someone else dictate your worth. The moment you break free from that mindset, the moment you trust in your own strength, that's the moment you stop surviving and start leading. India has made that choice, and history will remember it as the moment dependency ended and destiny began. You see, once India made the psychological shift to break away from dependency, the next realization was inevitable. America's leverage was never as strong as it seemed. For years, the United States used tariffs, sanctions, and diplomatic pressure like a bodybuilder flexing in front of the mirror. It looked intimidating, it felt powerful, and for a long time many countries believed it, but here's the truth. Muscle only matters if you can use it, and leverage only matters if the other side still fears it. The illusion of leverage is one of the oldest tricks in history. It's the same way a bully controls a playground. They don't have to hit everyone. They just have to convince you that they could, and suddenly you act small, you stay in line, you hesitate to stand up for yourself. America mastered this game in economics. By threatening to raise tariffs, by dangling access to its markets, it made countries think they had no choice. But leverage only works if you accept the terms of the game. And India, for the first time, refused. Think about it like this. If you're holding a chain on someone, you only control them as long as they keep pulling against it. The moment they let go, the chain falls to the ground. America thought its grip on India was unbreakable, but the truth is, there was no grip at all, just the illusion of one. Tariffs, they work when a country is desperate for your market. Sanctions, they work when a nation has no alternatives. Threats, they work when someone still believes you are the only option, but India no longer believes that. It knows it has choices. Russia, China, the Middle East, Africa. These doors are not just open, they are expanding. That is what makes American leverage collapse, not because America lost strength, but because India stopped playing the game by America's rules. And this is a powerful lesson for life, for nations, for individuals. Most of the control you think people have over you is an illusion. They don't actually control you. They control your fear. They control your belief that you cannot survive without them. Once you see through that, their power vanishes instantly. This is exactly what happened here. America believed it could pressure India into compliance, raise tariffs, cut deals on its terms, threaten to isolate. But instead of bowing down, India turned around and said, "We don't accept your premise. You are not our only option." And in that moment, all the intimidation evaporated. Now, this is not just politics, this is psychology at the highest level, because the greatest form of control is not physical, it is mental. The Romans knew it, the British Empire knew it, and America knows it today. Keep the world believing you are indispensable, and they will behave as if you are. But when someone like India stands up and says, "No, you're not," the empire begins to crack, not from weakness, but from exposure. The illusion is broken, and here's where we see something very important. America's leverage was never about strength, it was about perception. Yes, the U.S. is powerful, yes, its economy is massive, but what really gave it dominance was belief. The belief that no nation could grow outside of its orbit. The belief that rejecting its trade meant committing economic suicide. Once that belief is gone, leverage is gone. It's like when I was competing in bodybuilding. The moment my competitors believed I was unbeatable, I already won, even before stepping on stage. But when someone came along who didn't buy into that myth, who believed they could stand toe-to-toe with me, suddenly it was a real competition. That's what India has done. It stopped believing the myth of American leverage, and this changes everything. Because now, it's not just India that sees the illusion, it's every nation watching. Countries in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, they are looking at this moment and realizing, maybe we don't need to bend so easily. Maybe America's leverage is not what we thought it was. And once that thought spreads, once others start testing the illusion, the whole game changes. This is why I call it the illusion of leverage, because true power is not about threatening others. True power is about building such undeniable value that people want to work with you, not because they're afraid, but because they trust and respect you. America forgot this. It relied too much on intimidation and too little on genuine partnership, and intimidation always has an expiration date. So the question for you, for anyone listening, is this: how many illusions are holding you back in your own life? How many chains do you still believe are unbreakable, when in reality they were never locked at all? India just showed the world that sometimes the only thing keeping you trapped is your own acceptance of the illusion. And when you break that illusion, when you stop believing in false leverage, you don't just free yourself, you redefine the entire balance of power. India has done exactly that. And the message is clear: the age of illusions is over, the age of reality is here. When you look at history, you realize something very simple but very powerful. Geography is destiny. You cannot escape where you are placed on the map, no matter how much you try. For decades, India tried to balance itself between the West and the East, but deep down, the pull of geography was always there. On one side, Russia, on the other side, China, two massive powers sitting in the same neighborhood. And the question was never if India would align, it was when. The truth is, the old model, depending on America across oceans, was unnatural. It worked for a while because America was powerful, because it controlled the global financial system, because it seemed like the only road to success. But roads that cross oceans are fragile. Roads that connect neighbors, that run across continents, those are unbreakable. India has finally realized this. The future does not lie in looking across the Atlantic for approval. The future lies in connecting the dots of Eurasia, building an axis that is closer, stronger, and more sustainable. Think about it. For years, America could threaten India with tariffs. But can America stop Russia from selling oil to India? Can America stop China from trading goods across the border? Can it stop regional connectivity projects linking Central Asia, the Middle East, and South Asia? No, because geography beats threats. When you are close to your partners, trade is natural, cooperation is inevitable, and no outside force can fully break it. This is why I say India's realignment with Russia and China is not just strategy, it is destiny. The landmass of Eurasia has always been the center of gravity in history. Empires rose and fell there. Trade routes like the Silk Road shaped civilizations for centuries. The Atlantic world, with America and Europe, was just a phase. A powerful phase, yes, but still a phase, and now the pendulum is swinging back. The center of global power is shifting eastward, and India is placing itself at the heart of that shift. Now, let's be honest. This is not an easy move. India has tensions with China. It has competition, disagreements, even distrust. But psychology again teaches us something important. You don't have to love your neighbor to recognize the logic of cooperation. Sometimes survival and progress demand that you work with those who challenge you, and the smartest nations are the ones who turn rivals into partners when the situation demands it. That is strength. That is maturity. Russia, on the other hand, is India's old friend. The relationship is deep, built over decades of defense, energy, and trust. And today, when the West tries to isolate Moscow, India's partnership is even more powerful. It tells the world, we are not afraid to stand where it makes sense for us, not where someone else tells us to. That is sovereignty in action. So what we see now is the beginning of something bigger than trade deals. It's the shaping of a new axis, a Eurasian corridor that runs from Moscow to Beijing to New Delhi and stretches further into the Middle East and Africa. Imagine the potential: billions of people, endless resources, shared technologies, infrastructure that links markets without relying on the West. This is not just economics, this is the architecture of a new world order. And here's where the philosophy kicks in. The strongest structures are the ones built on balance. A multipolar Eurasia where power is distributed among India, China, Russia, and others creates stability. No single nation can dominate. No single empire can dictate the rules. That is healthier not just for the region but for the world. Because balance creates resilience, and resilience is what sustains civilizations. America's biggest mistake was believing the world would stay unipolar forever, but nature does not allow monopolies. Every time one empire tries to dominate too much, balance eventually returns. India understands this, and by leaning into its geography, it is accelerating that return to balance. Now ask yourself, what does this mean for the individual? What can you learn from this realignment? It means that sometimes your real strength is not across the ocean, not in some distant approval, but right next to you. Sometimes the people, the opportunities, the resources you need are already in your environment. You just have to stop ignoring them. Stop chasing validation from faraway places and start building with what is around you. That's how you create lasting power. India has realized this, and once a nation stops chasing illusions across oceans and starts building alliances on its own soil, nothing can stop it. That is how empires rise again, not by begging for access, but by creating centers of power that others cannot ignore. So when you see India turning toward Russia and China, don't see it as a betrayal of America. See it for what it truly is, a return to its natural place in history, a strategic realignment that reflects not weakness, but wisdom. And the message it sends to the entire world is simple. Geography is destiny, and destiny cannot be denied. When we talk about India breaking away from America and turning toward Russia and China, what we're really witnessing is something much bigger than trade agreements or diplomacy. We're seeing the return of a principle that governs not just politics, but life itself, balance, and balance is at the heart of what I call the philosophy of multipolarity. For too long, the world has lived under the illusion of unipolarity. America stood at the top, declaring itself the center of everything, the economy, the military, the culture, the narrative, and for a while it worked. The United States became the single pole around which the rest of the world had to orbit. But here's the problem. Nature doesn't like monopolies. Nature doesn't tolerate one tree growing so tall that nothing else can breathe. Eventually, the balance must return. Think about your own life. If one muscle grows while the rest of your body stays weak, you are not truly strong. You are unstable. If all you train is your biceps and you neglect your back, your legs, your core, sooner or later your body will break down. The same applies to the world. A unipolar world looks strong from the outside, but it is fragile. It lacks balance, and what we see now with India's shift is the beginning of restoring that balance. Multipolarity means more than just several nations holding power. It means no one has the ability to dictate the rules to everyone else. It means competition, yes, but also cooperation. It means options. It means that if one pole tries to dominate, others can rise to restore stability. That is how nature works, that is how ecosystems survive, and that is how civilizations thrive. India has recognized this. By moving closer to Russia and China, it is not choosing dependence on them. It is choosing balance. It is rejecting the trap of putting all its eggs in one basket. It is saying, we will not orbit around one sun. We will orbit around many, and in doing so, we will create a more stable universe. And here is the deeper psychological truth. People, like nations, are healthier when they are multipolar. If your entire self-worth depends on one job, one relationship, one source of validation, you are fragile. The moment that source disappears, you collapse. But if you build yourself across many strengths, your mind, your body, your craft, your community, then you are resilient. You can lose one pole and still stand strong because your life is balanced. That is multipolarity on a personal level. This is what India is teaching the world. For decades, America thought it could play the role of the single provider, the single enforcer, the single judge of what was right and wrong in global trade. But that model is breaking down. India is showing that there is another way, a multipolar order where no one has absolute power, but everyone has a seat at the table. And this doesn't create chaos, it creates harmony. Because when power is distributed, cooperation becomes more natural and arrogance has less room to grow. Now, some people fear multipolarity. They think it will mean confusion, instability, too many voices competing at once. But that's not true. Multipolarity doesn't mean disorder. It means balance of forces. Think of it like a gym. If one person lifts all the weight, everyone else grows weak and resentful. But if the weights are shared, everyone gets stronger and the whole environment becomes healthier. That is what India is fighting for, not dominance, but dignity, not monopoly, but equilibrium. And here is what makes this moment so historic. By walking away from American control, India is not only changing its own destiny. It is contributing to a world where no single nation can bully the rest. It is sending a message that cooperation will replace intimidation, that respect will replace dominance, that strength will come not from one empire towering over others, but from many nations rising together. This is the philosophy of multipolarity: strength through balance, freedom through options, harmony through diversity of power. It is not just politics, it is a way of thinking, it is a way of living. So let me leave you with this: do not put your life in the hands of one pole, do not depend on one source of strength, one path, one approval. Build yourself like a multipolar world, balanced, resilient, unshakable. That is how you thrive, that is how you endure, that is how you lead. India has chosen multipolarity, and in doing so it has chosen the future. At the heart of every great decision, there is one force that matters more than strategy, more than politics, even more than economics. That force is dignity. The moment a person, or a nation, loses its sense of dignity, it loses everything. And that is why India's choice to walk away from American trade dominance is not simply a policy shift. It is an act of self-respect. For years, America treated trade as a one-way street. It presented itself not as a partner, but as a gatekeeper. The message was always the same: we will give you access, but only on our terms. We will allow you to participate, but only if you follow our rules. We will do business with you, but never as equals. And for a long time, many countries accepted this arrangement, not because they liked it, but because they believed they had no alternative. But here's the truth: when you accept unfair terms, when you play along with a system that constantly places you beneath someone else, you are not just making an economic compromise, you are surrendering your identity. You are saying we are willing to be less than we are for the sake of convenience, and eventually that erodes the very soul of a nation. India finally said enough, enough of being treated like a junior partner. Enough of bending under tariffs and lectures, enough of being told what its choices should be. This is what I call economic self-respect. It is not arrogance, it is not rebellion. It is the basic recognition that true growth cannot come at the cost of your dignity. And let's be honest, the easy path would have been to continue, to keep benefiting from American markets, to tolerate the pressure, to swallow the pride, and to tell themselves it was worth it. But easy paths don't make strong nations. Easy paths make dependent nations, and India chose the hard path, the path of independence, of sovereignty, of long-term identity over short-term comfort. That is what makes this moment historic. Now, some people will say, but what about the economic pain? What about the costs of losing trade advantages? And they are right. There will be costs, but let me tell you something: dignity is always more expensive than submission. Freedom is always more costly than dependency, and yet it is always worth it. Because while money comes and goes, dignity, once lost, is almost impossible to regain. This is where psychology plays a role again. Nations, like people, need to believe in themselves. They need to see themselves as worthy, as capable, as equal players on the world stage. If they allow themselves to be treated as second class, that belief dies. And when belief dies, ambition dies. But when a nation stands up for itself, even against the strongest opponent, its people feel it. Its people internalize it. They walk taller, they think bigger, they act with more confidence. That is the invisible power of dignity. India's decision, therefore, is not just about economics. It is about telling its citizens and the world that it refuses to live on its knees. It would rather endure short-term sacrifice than accept long-term humiliation. That kind of courage redefines a national identity. It transforms how a people see themselves and how the world sees them, and this is something every one of you can apply to your own life. How many times have you accepted less than you deserve just because it was easier? How many times have you tolerated disrespect just because you didn't want to lose the benefit attached to it? But here's the truth: every time you accept less than you are worth, you teach others to treat you that way. Every time you surrender your dignity for convenience, you weaken yourself. India is teaching us the opposite. It is showing us that sometimes the most powerful word you can say is no. No to unfair terms. No to dependency, no to being treated as less. That one word, when spoken with conviction, can change everything. So yes, this is about trade, but at its core it is about something much larger, the right of a nation to stand with pride. The right of a people to define their own worth, the right to protect dignity above profit, and let me tell you, history always remembers those who chose dignity over submission. It remembers the nations and the individuals who said, "We will not compromise who we are, no matter the cost." That is how leaders are born, that is how civilizations rise, that is how true independence is built. India has chosen dignity, and dignity, my friends, is priceless. What we are witnessing right now is not just India ending trade with America. It is not just a pivot toward Russia and China. It is the dawn of a new global equation. This is the rewriting of the rules of power, the redrawing of the world map, not in lines of territory, but in lines of influence. And moments like this do not come often. They come once in a generation, maybe once in a century. For decades, the world has lived under the shadow of the Atlantic Order. America and Europe were the architects. They set the rules, they controlled the financial system, they held the hammer of sanctions, and they believed their dominance was eternal. But nothing in history is eternal, not Rome, not Britain, not even America. Every empire reaches its peak, and then the world begins to shift. That is what is happening now. India, by breaking away, has made itself more than just a participant. It has made itself an architect. Think about that. For years, India was seen as a market to exploit, a player to recruit, a voice to persuade. But now it has chosen to be one of the hands that draws the blueprint of the next century. That is what makes this moment historic, and the equation is very clear. The old formula was America at the center, the rest of the world revolving around it. The new formula is multiple centers of gravity, connected by shared interests, balanced by geography, and driven by dignity. This is not the collapse of order, it is the evolution of order, a shift from unipolar to multipolar, from dominance to balance, from intimidation to cooperation. Now let's go deeper. Why does this matter? Why should anyone care about which nation trades with which? Because this is more than politics. It is psychology at the level of humanity. When one player dominates the game for too long, everyone else begins to shrink. Their ambition shrinks, their confidence shrinks, their sense of possibility shrinks, and when they finally break away, when they finally say, "We will build something of our own," it's like a new muscle awakening. That is what the world is feeling now, a new energy, a new muscle being flexed. India is not turning away from America to isolate itself. It is turning toward a future where no nation is indispensable, where every nation has options, where cooperation is chosen freely, not forced through leverage. That is a healthier system. That is a stronger system, because real strength does not come from one man lifting all the weight. Real strength comes from everyone getting stronger together. And if you look carefully, you'll see the chain reaction already beginning. Countries in Africa, in South America, in Southeast Asia, they are watching, they are thinking, if India can do it, maybe we can too. If India can walk away from pressure, maybe we don't have to accept it either. And this is how revolutions begin, not always with guns or protests, but with one example that inspires others to believe. This is the dawn of a new global equation, one where power is not concentrated in one pole, but shared across many. One where the East is no longer a follower, but a leader. One where nations no longer trade dignity for access, but demand respect as equals. And India, by taking this step, has placed itself at the center of this transformation. Now I want you to think about what this means for you, because this is not just about nations, this is about life. Every one of us is living within some equation, an equation that defines who we depend on, who we give power to, who we allow to dictate our worth. And most of the time, that equation is unbalanced. One person, one job, one approval, one paycheck holds too much weight in our lives, and we live under its shadow, just like nations lived under America's. But just as India is showing the world, you can rewrite the equation, you can create balance, you can build a life with multiple centers of strength, your health, your relationships, your skills, your vision. That way, if one part collapses, you do not collapse, you are resilient, you are independent, you are free. That is the ultimate lesson of this moment. Whether you are a nation or an individual, the power to change your destiny begins when you refuse to accept imbalance, when you choose dignity, when you embrace balance, and when you dare to write a new equation for yourself. The Atlantic world defined the last century, the Eurasian axis will define the next, and India has chosen to be at its heart. So let me leave you with this: history does not remember those who followed the rules of others. It remembers those who had the courage to write new rules, to redefine the game, to stand with dignity when others bowed. India has chosen that path, and the world will never be the same again.